Good afternoon. My name is Ben Roll. I'm an application engineer with Ally PLM Solutions. Just want to welcome you to the Ally PLM Lunch Bytes series. This series is designed to briefly explore the capabilities within Solid Edge that are often overlooked. If you don't know by now, we hold these sessions every other Thursday at 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 Central. We want our Lunch Bytes to be valuable to you, so please let us know if you have any suggestions about topics that you'd like us to cover. Just send us an email with those. If you have any questions regarding today's session, please write them down and send them to us in an email. Today's Lunch Byte is on Animating Assemblies, and it's going to feature Armalite's AR50 Rifle. I want to thank them for letting us use that for this presentation. You should have all gotten an email before this about the animation that's saved out. We put it on YouTube so you could check it out before we go over it. When you've made your assembly and decided that you want to go ahead and animate it, there's different applications that you can use that animation for. You could use it for presentations, marketing, training purposes, and instructional things, or you could use it for demonstrations. Just to cover the workflow for today, I'm going to go over modifying constraints, applying motors, simulating the motors, and then we're going to go over the explode, render, and animate environment and the animation editor in there. We're going to go over the motors, motion paths, explosions, appearances, and camera path. And then we're going to go over how to save that animation out as a movie so you can use it later. Since we're just doing a basic instructional thing, this animation is kind of an overview of all the tools that you have available. We do offer training, and that'll go more in depth and get you started a little bit better, but this will at least get you so you can mess around with it. The first thing we want to do is place a motor, and that'll allow us to simulate motion and see how a set of under-constrained parts are going to move. So in order to do that, you have to have an unconstrained part to place that motor on. And since you went ahead and made your assembly, chances are all your parts are constrained. So first you're going to have to remove constraints in order to place the motor. In this case, we're going to remove constraints from the receiver because the bolt is going to slide inside there, and we're going to place the motor on this part right here. So first we'll click on that. That way we can see all the constraints that are related to the receiver. And we're just going to go down to this one and right-click on it and choose Suppress, and that'll tell Solid Edge to ignore that constraint. So now that we've done that, we'll be able to place a motor on this part. So I'm just going to zoom into it a little bit, make it easier to see. Pick the motor up here from the toolbar, and then you click on the part that you want to place it on. Once you do that, you'll notice that there are a few different ways that you can pick to place it. For rotational one, you can pick cylindrical faces, edges, or axes. For this, we just want to pick the center of this cylinder, and because we want the bolt to rotate up, we're going to flip the rotation, and because we know that there's a certain distance that we want it to rotate, we're going to go ahead and put a limit on this rotation of 100 degrees. And that'll tell the motor to stop after it's rotated 100 degrees. So we've got the first one placed. Now we want to place a linear motor on it so we can simulate the motion of it sliding back. Once again, we're going to pick that part, and again I can pick faces, edges, or center of any cylinder. I'm going to pick the center of that cylinder again, And again, we're going to have to flip the direction. We're also going to want to increase the speed a little bit. And that's all you have to do to place the motor. Really pretty easy. Now we want to simulate the motion that that motor is going to cause. So we'll just zoom back out and we'll pick this simulate motor command, and that'll bring up the options for the motors and this animation window down here. So for the options, you'll notice there's 3 different types of motion. No analysis, which will just move the parts and they'll move right through any other part that they come in contact with. If you choose detect collisions, it'll still have the same motion. It'll move through whatever parts are in its way, but it will highlight where collisions are taking place. And for this particular animation, we want physical motion. And what Solid Edge does with that is it'll simulate the physical motion of the parts by detecting contact between the parts, and if it'll temporarily apply constraints so that the parts will slide past each other and not just move straight through. The next thing we want to do is check the duration. Because we placed a limit on one of our motors, we want to make sure this use motor limits as duration is checked, and that will set the duration down here in the timeline to whatever the limit is. And then you can also pick the default time for any motors that aren't don't have a limit on them. Then you can pick on this side the motors. This is where all the motors that are in your assembly are listed, and you can add them or remove any that you don't want. So once you have that set, just click OK, and it'll bring them into this animation timeline down here. You'll see they come up as bars, and that just represents how long that particular animation event will occur. All you have to do, because you probably don't want all the motors to start at once, you can just pick on one of the bars, slide them to wherever you need it. Now, if you put a default time and you realize you don't actually want that motor to go for that long, all you have to do is, if you want to shorten it, you can click on the end, and you'll notice that my cursor changes to just a little arrow pointing away from it. You just click on that and drag it. You'll see that dotted line that tells you where it is, so you can, it makes it real easy to see what frame you're moving it to. You just drag it, put it, and that changes the duration. And you'll notice that now this motor, the bar is turned orange because that motor had a limit on it, and that was set as the default. This tells you that you changed it and now it's shorter than it could be. So now that we have the motors placed and the events lined up, we're going to go ahead and get out of the motor simulation, and you'll notice that this window pops up asking you if you want to save the changes. And we're going to go ahead and say yes, and then when we go into the other animation editor, you'll notice that we don't have to put those motors on it again. So now we want to go into the Explode, Render, and Animate environment. You just go up to your tools, click into the environment, and brings it up. And now we want this animation editor, so we just click on that, and this time you'll notice we get the same window down here, and because we saved it when we did the simulate motors, now we don't have to place those motors again and line them up. But you'll also notice that now we have more options over here on the side. The first thing that we're going to go over is a motion path. For this rifle, one of the key features of it is how the receiver meets the stock, and it gives it a nice sturdy platform for shooting. Now in order to show that, we need to move the barrel and stuff out of the way, that way we can see it. So the first thing we're going to do is create a motion path to pull that barrel away. All you have to do to create the motion path is right over here on this motion button, click that, and then you select the parts that you're going to want to move. Now to select more than one, you just click on the first one, and then you hold down Control on your keyboard and select the other parts that you want to move. Now that we have this selected, just click Accept, and now it brings up the place to draw the path. For this, if you hit X on your keyboard, it'll lock the plane that you're going to draw on. For this, it's just real simple path that we're drawing, single straight line, so we're going to put it on the top, and then we'll change our view so we have a top view, and then we just click on a part where we want this path to start, and then drag our cursor out, and we'll pick where we want that point to end up after the motion is done. So we'll just pick a point right out here, and if you want to define a more complicated path, you can pick more than one point. If you want a curved path, you can do that. You just place the next point and it'll curve it, or if you want a straight path, you can select that option up here, and then your path will be straight. We only have 2 points because it's a real simple path. So we'll pick that, hit Accept, and then we'll finish it. And now you'll notice down here that we have another event under the path category. And just like with the other one, you can change the duration, but with this it has key points, which is where each of those points that we picked are. And you can still move the event the same way we did, but you have to be careful about selecting down here on the key point. And I'll go over that a little bit more when we get to the camera. And just like with the other ones, you can drag it to wherever you want. And you'll notice that down here, if we want this past the other motor, we've kind of run out of room. So in order to take care of that, we can change the animation properties. To do that, we just click on this Animation Properties button over here, and then that'll bring up this window, and you can change the frames per second. They have a few standards here, and you can change the animation length. So we're going to go ahead and put in like 30 seconds, something like that. And you'll notice that now it increased the timeline and we have a lot more room. When you're doing animations, you can have as many as you want inside one assembly. So say we wanted to create another animation, we would just click on this New Animation button and type in the name for the animation, and we'd have the same options that we just saw with the animation properties. And then you can switch from one animation to another with this drop down right here. Right now we only have one animation, so that's all that's going to show up. Next, we're going to use an explosion event to move this part right here. I'm going to go ahead and click over here just to get rid of that yellow on those parts. So to create the explosion event, you just select it over here in the animation window, right click, edit definition. And now what you'll do, you'll have already created an explosion in this environment before you go into the animation editor and save that configuration out. And you'll just select it from this drop down right here. Then you'll pick how you want the event to start. You can choose so that it starts with everything exploded and then pulls them together, or starts collapsed and then explodes everything out. You'll see down here you have options for the speed, and you also have options for the order. And what the order does, it'll either explode all the parts together and then explode them individually, or it'll take the first part, move that out, then the second part, then the third part, until everything's all out. We want it to start collapsed, and since we have one part, this animation order doesn't really matter. And now you'll see that down here under the explosion group, we have 3 lines that have showed up. You'll also notice that we can't see that path line that we made earlier. So we can move this window up. We just come up here, click, and drag the window up to let us see all this without having to mess with scrolling down. With the explosion event, you can only have one per animation. You'll notice that we have 3 lines. This top line is just that whole explosion. Then we have this group and this event. And if you have more than one part, you'll have more than one event. So you'll have event 1, 2, 3, 4, however many parts you have. And if you explode each part individually, then these will all be staggered and you can adjust where they are inside this explosion bar. But since we only have one part exploding, you can't really see that. Now that'll let us see this receiver. But another thing we want to show is for this particular model, to remove the bolt completely for storage, transportation, cleaning, all you have to do is press this little button right here, and that'll let you slide it all the way out. And if we want to show how that happens, we can't really see it because the receiver's in the way. What we can do, we could, pull the receiver out of the way, but there's this appearance event, and we can use that to make the receiver partially visible or totally invisible. All we have to do is click on this appearance button over here by the motion, and then we select that part, we accept it, and now you'll see these options. Pick how the part starts. We can choose the visibility or the color, but we want to go ahead and use the part style. And then we select how it finishes. So for this, we want to go ahead and do the 50% visible. That way you can still tell that it's there, but you can see inside of it. You also get to pick over here how many frames it's going to take for this appearance to happen. We're just going to go ahead and leave it as 100 for now. Now we go ahead and hit finish, and now you see under the appearance group, we have another bar, and that's just the duration of that appearance. So we can go ahead and position that however we want. Go ahead and position that explosion. And then last thing, we mentioned that we want to show this removing the bolt all the way, and we also want to show how the receiver meets the stock. But we also want to show how the bolt comes out. And we can't do all of that from just this one camera angle. So we're going to have to go ahead and make a camera path and rotate the camera around to show all the individual things that we want. Now to do that, we just click on this camera path button right here, and that brings up the camera path wizard. You have three different options. You can pick just a fly around view, or you can pick named views, which is what we're going to do. Or if you have multiple animations and one of those already has a camera view, you can just use that same camera view and you don't have to worry about recreating it. Like I said, for ours we're going to use named views, and that's probably the easiest way to show individual things on the assembly that you want without having to draw the path like you would with the motion and then worry about how the camera is facing. This is really easy. You just pick the views that you want, add them over to the other window over there. We'll just go ahead and pick a few of these. And then, you can come over here and move them up. And then you just click Next, and it'll let you preview it. What Solid Edge is going to do is it's going to take each of those views and turn it into a keyframe, which will just be a point on the camera path. And now it'll transition automatically between each view. That way you don't have to worry about drawing that path. And you can kind of see here, it'll let you preview it, and you can run through and see how the camera is going to rotate, and then decide, maybe you don't like how it is, you want a different view, you want to remove one, you can just click back and change them around, come back, preview it, get one that you're happy with, and then click Finish. And now you'll notice that we have this nice long bar and the camera path. And like I mentioned down with the motion path, we have these keyframes. It's a lot easier to see them in the camera because they just show up as these little white lines in the gray bar. Now I'll go ahead and show you what the camera path looks like. There's a Show Camera Path button, and then we'll zoom out a little bit, and now you can see this big line that looks just like the line we drew with the motion path. And each of these black dots is a point on that line, and that corresponds to one of these keyframes. Now since Solid Edge went ahead and automatically transitioned from one view to another, this spacing in between views is the same throughout. But say you want to get from one camera view to the next a little bit faster or a little bit slower. All you have to do is click on this key point and drag it down to wherever you want. and that'll either, if you drag it closer, transition faster, farther away, transition slower. And you want to try to keep your cursor in that line to get it to move. If you actually, move it down a little bit, you'll see the little X next to my cursor, and that's telling you that, you're not on the motion or the camera event anymore. And if you happen to let go when you're not on it, it'll ask you if you want to delete the keyframe. And you're just going to want to say no, because all you were trying to do is move it. And now you'll see that it's down there, and I can just select it, move it up a little bit if I want, and just put it wherever I want. That's pretty much all we're going to cover as far as the animation events. Like I said, we offer training that'll go more in depth and give you a little bit more details about some of the other options, some of the ways to tweak the timing and stuff, but this is just basic overview. These dotted lines that come up make it really easy to see what frame it starts at, what frame it stops at. If you want, instead of frames, you can do time, just this toggle switch right here. That's pretty much all. Now what we're going to cover is how to save this animation out as a movie. Pretty easy. All you have to do, click this Save as Movie, and then you're going to want to come into these options, and you've got a list of options here. First one we're going to look at is the view style. Now, unless you've changed something with your view style, this default, the presentation view style, should be fine. The next thing is the compression codec. By default, Solid Edge picks this full frames uncompressed, which is a lossless format. Just like music, the new lossless formats that they have out, that's the best for the quality of the music. You don't lose any of it due to compression, but just like with music, this video, if you do the uncompressed, it's going to really drive up the file size. The other thing that drives up the file size, and also the time to save it, is the quality. You just move that around with this slider bar right here. Pick whatever you want. Another thing is output range. Now say when you created your animation, you thought, maybe it's going to take a minute for this animation. But once you have it all laid out and polished and stuff, you realize that it only took 45, 50 seconds. And instead of going back into your properties and changing the animation duration, you can just do this range of frames for the output and just pick what frame you want to start at, what frame you want to stop at, and it will only save the frames in between. Next thing is this output size. Now Solid Edge automatically does the preset, and they have a few preset ratios of height to width in here. But if you want a nice high quality animation, you're going to want to do this custom. And now you can change the width and the height on your own. If you have this maintain aspect ratio checked, you change one, it'll automatically change the other. If you want to change each individually on your own, you can uncheck that. And one thing you'll notice, if you look at this right now, the height is set at 488. And what that depends on is this screen right here of Solid Edge, not on your actual display configuration. So just to show you that, if we cancel out and we want, a bigger screen, all we have to do, minimize the animation, and we can minimize our ribbon up here. And now if we go back into that Save as Movie, go into the options, you'll notice that if we click on Custom, now the height is 919 pixels. So that's how you can kind of mess around with that. Now because there are a lot of options here, in order to find the settings that you need for your particular animation, you're going to have to play around with them, try different ones, see how to get the quality that you want. Now if you have a big animation, that could take a while. So what you're going to want to do is do this range of frames and just maybe do 50, 100 frames to give you a little glimpse of that animation to see what the quality is. And that way, instead of saving out the whole animation to find the settings you want, you just save out a little part and it only takes a few seconds. So that's pretty much all as far as saving the movie. Now to see a preview of your movie, you do have this play button right here, and if you click on that, it'll go through what you're going to see for your animation. That's pretty much all as far as simulating the motors, creating the animations. We went over removing the constraints, placing the motors, simulating the motors, creating the motion events, creating the explosion events, and creating the appearance events, camera path, then how to arrange all those events in the animation timeline and save out that animation. Now in order to get an animation like you saw up on YouTube and you see here in this picture, all you have to do is do a rendering and click on that render scenes button before you save the animation, and that will save it out as this rendered view. And we have Lunch Bytes up on our YouTube channel, replay of this and all our other ones, youtube.com/AllyPLM, and on there you can find the Lunch Bytes that we did on rendering. Also, we have our training classes, like I mentioned. We have training for motion and animation. We have training for rendering and advanced techniques. We also have our fundamentals training and our ST3 update training. You can just go to our website to find out more information about that. Once again, we want to thank Armalite for letting us use their rifle for this Lunch Bytes session. Thank you for your attention. Hope you found that the session was informative. Once again, please email us with any suggestions you have for future Lunch Byte topics. Also, let us know if you have any questions. We appreciate your business. Let us know if you have any issues or questions with the tech support team. You know, we're here to help you guys. Our next regularly scheduled session will be on December 9th, and that's going to cover the steering wheel and live rules in ST3. Once again, thank you for your attention. Have a great afternoon.